Homily 17, Matthew 5:27-37. Ye have heard that it was said to them of old time, Thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you, that every one who looketh upon a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. Having now finished the former commandment, and having extended it unto the height of self-denial, he, advancing in course and order, proceeds accordingly unto the second, herein to obeying the law. And yet, it may be said, this is not the second, but the third, for neither is the first, Thou shalt not kill, but the Lord thy God is one Lord. Wherefore it is worth inquiring too, why he did not begin with that. Why was it then? Because, had he begun from thence, he must have enlarged it also, and have brought in himself together with his Father. But it was not as yet time to teach any such thing about himself. And besides, he was for a while practicing his moral doctrine only, being minded from this first, and from his miracles, to convince the hearers that he was the Son of God. Now, if he had said at once, before he had spoken or done anything, Ye have heard that it was said to them of old time, I am the Lord thy God, and there is none other but me. But I say unto you, worship me even as him. This would have made all regard him as a madman. For if, even after his teaching, and his so great miracles, while not even yet was he saying this openly, they called him possessed with a devil. Had he before all these attempted to say any such thing, what would they not have said? What would they not have thought? But keeping back at the proper season his teaching on these subjects, he was causing that the doctrine should be acceptable to the many. Wherefore now he passed it by quickly. But when he had everywhere established it by his miracles, and by his most excellent teaching, he afterwards unveiled it in words also. For the present, however, by the manifestation of his miracles, and by the very manner of his teaching, he unfolds it on occasion, gradually and quietly. For his enacting such laws, and such corrections of laws, with authority, would lead on the attentive and understanding hearer, by little and little, unto the word of his doctrine. For it is said, They were astonished at him, because he taught not as their scribes. For beginning from those passions which most belong to our whole race, anger I mean, and desire, for it is these chiefly that bear absolute sway within us, and are more natural than the rest. He, with great authority, even such as became a legislator, both corrected them and reduced them to order with all strictness. For he said not that the adulterer merely is punished, but what he had done with respect to the murderer, this he doth here also, punishing even the unchaste look, to teach thee wherein lies what he had more than the scribes. Accordingly, he saith, He that looketh upon a woman to lust after her hath already committed adultery with her. That is, he who makes it his business to be curious about bright forms, and to hunt for elegant features, and to feast his soul with the sight, and to fasten his eyes on fair countenances. For he came to set free from all evil deeds, not the body only, but the soul too before the body. Thus, because in the heart we receive the grace of the Spirit, he cleanses it out first. And how, one may say, is it possible to be freed from desire? I answer, first, if we were willing, even this might be deadened, and remain inactive. In the next place, he doth not here take away desire absolutely, but that desire which springs up in men from sight. For he that is curious to behold fair countenances is himself chiefly the enkindler of the furnace of that passion, and makes his own soul a captive, and soon proceeds also to the act. Thus we see why he said not, whosoever shall lust to commit adultery, but whosoever shall look to lust. And in the case of anger he laid down a certain distinction, saying, without a cause, and for naught. But here not so. Rather, once for all he took away the desire. Yet surely both are naturally implanted, and both are set in us for our profit, both anger and desire, the one that we may chastise the evil, and correct those who walk disorderly, the other that we may have children, and that our race may be recruited by such successions. Why then did he not make a distinction here also? Nay, very great is the distinction which, if thou attend, thou wilt see here also included. For he said not simply, whosoever shall desire, since it is possible for one to desire even when sitting in the mountains, but whosoever shall look to lust, that is to say, he who gathers in lust unto himself, he who, when nothing compels him, brings in the wild beast upon his thoughts when they are calm. For this comes no longer of nature, but of self-indulgence. This even the ancient Scripture corrects from the first, saying, contemplate not beauty which is another's. And then, lest any one should say, what then, if I contemplate, and be not taken captive? He punishes the look, lest, confiding in this security, thou shouldest sometime fall into sin. What then, one may say, if I should look, and desire indeed, but do no evil? Even so thou art set among the adulterers, for the lawgiver hath pronounced it, and thou must not ask any more questions. For thus, looking once, twice, or thrice, thou wilt perhaps have power to refrain. But if thou art continually doing this, and kindling the furnace, thou wilt surely be taken, for thy station is not beyond that nature which is common to men. As we then, if we see a child holding a knife, though we do not see him hurt, beat him and forbid his ever holding it, so God likewise takes away the unchaste look even before the act, lest at any time thou shouldest fall in act also. For he who hath once kindled the flame, even when the woman whom he hath beheld is absent, is forming by himself continually images of shameful things, and from them often goes on even to the deed. For this cause Christ takes away even that embrace which is in the heart only. What now can they say, who have those virgin inmates? Why, by the tenor of this law they must be guilty of 10,000 adulteries, daily beholding them with desire. For this cause the blessed Job also laid down this law from the beginning, blocking out from himself on all sides this kind of gazing. For in truth, greater is the struggle on beholding, and not possessing the object of fondness. Nor is the pleasure so great which we reap from the sight, as the mischief we undergo from increasing this desire, thus making our opponent strong, and giving more scope to the devil, and no longer able to repulse him, now that we have brought him into our inmost parts, and have thrown our mind open unto him. Therefore he saith, Commit no adultery with thine eyes, and thou wilt commit none with thy mind. For one may indeed behold in another way, such as are the looks of the chaste. Wherefore he did not altogether prohibit our seeing, but that seeing which is accompanied with desire. And if he had not meant this, he would have said simply, he who looketh on a woman. But now he said not thus, but he who looketh to lust, he who looketh to please his sight. For not at all to this end did God make the eyes, that thou shouldest thereby introduce adultery, but that, beholding his creatures, thou shouldest admire the artificer. Just then as one may feel wrath at random, so may one cast looks at random, that is, when thou doest it for lust. Rather, if thou desirest to look and find pleasure, look at thine own wife, and love her continually. No law forbids that. But if thou art to be curious about the beauties that belong to another, thou art injuring both thy wife by letting thine eyes wander elsewhere, and her on whom thou hast looked, by touching her unlawfully. Since, although thou hast not touched her with the hand, yet hast thou caressed her with thine eyes, for which cause this also is accounted adultery. And before that great penalty draws after it no slight one of its own. For then all within him is filled with disquiet and turmoil, and great is the tempest, and most grievous the pain. And no captive nor person in chains can be worse off than a man in this state of mind. And oftentimes she who hath shot the dart is flown away, while the wound even so remains. Or rather, it is not she who hath shot the dart, but thou gavest thyself the fatal wound by thine unchaste look. And this I say to free modest women from the charge, since assuredly should one deck herself out, and invite towards herself the eyes of such as fall in her way, even though she smite not him that meets with her, she incurs the utmost penalty, for she mixed the poison, she prepared the hemlock, even though she did not offer the cup. Or rather, she did also offer the cup, though no one were found to drink it. Why then doth he not discourse with them also, it may be said? Because the laws which he appoints are in every case common, although he seem to address himself unto men only. For in discoursing with the head, he makes his admonition common to the whole body also. For woman and man he knows as one living creature, and nowhere distinguishes their kind. But if thou desirest to hear also his rebuke for them in particular, listen to Isaiah, in many words inveighing against them, and deriding their habit, their aspect, their gait, their trailing garments, their tripping feet, their drooping necks. Hear with him the blessed Paul also, setting many laws for them, and both about garments, and ornaments of gold, and plaiting of hair, and luxurious living, and all other such things, vehemently rebuking this sex. And Christ too, by what follows next, obscurely intimated this very same. For when he saith, Pluck out and cut off the eye that offendeth thee, he speaks as indicating his anger against them. Wherefore also he subjoins, If thy right eye offend thee, pluck it out, and cast it from thee. Thus, lest thou shouldest say, But what if she be akin to me? What if in any other way she belong to me? Therefore he hath given these injunctions, not discoursing about our limbs, far from it. For nowhere doth he say that our flesh is to be blamed for things, but everywhere it is the evil mind that is accused. For it is not the eye that sees, but the mind and the thought. Often, for instance, we being wholly turned elsewhere, our eye sees not those who are present, so that the matter does not entirely depend upon its working. Again, had he been speaking of members of the body, he would not have said it of one eye, nor of the right eye only, but of both. For he who is offended by his right eye most evidently will incur the same evil by his left also. Why then did he mention the right eye, and add the hand? To show thee that not of limbs is he speaking, but of them who are near unto us. Thus, if, saith he, thou so lovest any one, as though he were instead of a right eye, if thou thinkest him so profitable to thee as to esteem him in place of a hand, and he hurts thy soul, even these do thou cut off. And see the emphasis, for he said not, withdraw from him, but to show the fullness of the separation, pluck it out, saith he, and cast it from thee. Then, forasmuch as his injunction was sharp, he shows also the gain on either hand, both from the benefits and from the evils, continuing in the metaphor. For it is profitable for thee, saith he, that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. For while he neither saves himself, nor fails to destroy thee too, what kindness is it for both to sink, whereas if they were separated, one at least might have been preserved? But why did Paul then, it may be said, choose to become accursed? Not on condition of gaining nothing, but with a view to the salvation of others. But in this case the mischief pertains to both, and therefore he said not, pluck out only, but also, cast from thee, to receive him again no more, if he continues as he is. For so shalt thou both deliver him from a heavier charge, and free thyself from ruin. But that thou mayest see yet more clearly the profit of this law, let us, if you please, try what hath been said, in the case of the body itself, by way of supposition. I mean, if choice were given, and thou must either, keeping thine eye, be cast into a pit and perish, or plucking it out, preserve the rest of thy body, wouldest thou not of course accept the latter? It is plain to every one. For this were not to act as one hating the eye, but as one loving the rest of the body. This same reckoning do thou make with regard to men also, and women, that if he who harms thee by his friendship should continue incurable, his being thus cut off will both free thee from all mischief, and he also will himself be delivered from the heavier charges, not having to answer for thy destruction along with his own evil deeds. Seest thou how full the law is of gentleness and tender care, in that which seems to men in general to be severity, how much love towards man it discloses? Let them hearken to these things, who hasten to the theatres, and make themselves adulterers every day. For if the law commands to cut him off, whose connection with us tends to our hurt, what plea can they have, who, by their haunting those places, attract towards them daily those even that have not yet become known to them, and procure to themselves occasions of ruin without number? For henceforth he not only forbids us to look unchastely, but having signified the mischief thence ensuing, he even straightens the law as he goes on, commanding to cut off, and dissever, and cast somewhere far away. And all this he ordains who hath uttered words beyond number about love, that in either way thou mightest learn his providence, and how from every source he seeks thy profit. Now it hath been said, Whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. But I say unto you, Whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery. And whosoever marrieth her that is put away, committeth adultery. He goes not on to what lies before him, until he have well cleared out the former topics. For lo, he shows us yet another kind of adultery. And what is this? There was an ancient law made, that he who hated his wife, for whatever kind of cause, should not be forbidden to cast her out, and to bring home another instead of her. The law, however, did not command him simply to do this, but after giving the woman a writing of divorcement, that it might not be in her power to return to him again, that so at least the figure of the marriage might remain. For if he had not enjoined this, but it were lawful first to cast her out, and take another, then afterwards to take back the former, the confusion was sure to be great, all men continually taking each other's wives, and the matter thenceforth would have been direct adultery. With a view to this, he devised, as no small mitigation, the writing of divorcement. But these things were done by reason of another, a far greater wickedness. I mean, had he made it necessary to keep in the house her even that was hated, the husband, hating, would have killed her. For such was the race of the Jews. For they who did not spare children, who slew prophets and shed blood as water, much more would they have showed no mercy to women. For this cause he allowed the less to remove the greater evil. For that this was not a primary law, hear him saying, Moses wrote these things according to the hardness of your hearts, that ye might not slay them in the house, but rather put them out. But forasmuch as he had taken away all wrath, having forbidden not murder only, but even the mere feeling of anger, he with ease introduces this law likewise. With this view also he is ever bringing to mind the former words, to signify that his sayings are not contrary to them, but in agreement, that he is enforcing, not overthrowing them, perfecting, not doing them away. And observe him everywhere addressing his discourse to the man. Thus, he that putteth away his wife, saith he, causeth her to commit adultery, and he that marrieth a woman put away committeth adultery. That is, the former, though he take not another wife, by that act alone hath made himself liable to blame, having made the first an adulteress. The latter again is become an adulterer by taking her who is another's. For tell me not this, the other hath cast her out. Nay, for when cast out she continues to be the wife of him that expelled her. Then lest he should render the wife more self-willed, by throwing it all upon him who cast her out, he hath shut against her also the doors of him who was afterwards receiving her. And that he saith, He who marrieth her that is put away committeth adultery. And so makes the woman chaste, even though unwilling, and blocks up altogether her access to all, and suffers her not to give an occasion for jealousy. For she who hath been made aware that she positively must either keep the husband who was originally allotted to her, or being cast out of the house, not have any other refuge, she even against her will was compelled to make the best of her consort. And if he discourse not at all unto her concerning these things, marvel not, for the woman is rather a weak creature. For this cause letting her go, in his threatening against the men, he fully corrects her remissness. just as if any one who had a prodigal child, leaving him, should rebuke those who make him such, and forbid them to have intercourse or to approach him. And if that be galling, call to mind, I pray thee, his former sayings, on what terms he had blessed his hearers, and thou wilt see that it is very possible and easy. For he that is meek, and a peacemaker, and poor in spirit, and merciful, how shall he cast out his wife? He that is used to reconcile others, how shall he be at variance with her that is his own? And not thus only, but in another way also he hath lightened the enactment, forasmuch as even for him he leaves one manner of dismissal, when he saith, except for the cause of fornication, since the matter had else come round again to the same issue. For if he had commanded to keep her in the house, though defiling herself with many, he would have made the matter end again in adultery. Seest thou how these sayings agree with what had gone before? For he who looks not with unchaste eyes upon another woman will not commit whoredom, and not committing whoredom, he will give no occasion to the husband to cast out his wife. Therefore, you see, after this he presses the point without reserve, and builds up this fear as a bulwark, urging on the husband the great danger, if he do cast her out, in that he makes himself accountable for her adultery. Thus, lest thou being told, pluck out the eye, should it suppose this to be said even of a wife, he added in good time this corrective, in one way only giving leave to cast her out, but no otherwise. Again, you have heard that it was said to them of old time, Thou shalt not forswear thyself, but shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths. But I say unto you, swear not at all. Why did he go straightway not to theft, but to false witness, passing over that commandment? Because he that steals doth upon occasion swear also. But he that knows not either swearing or speaking falsehood, much less will he choose to steal. So that by this he hath overthrown the other sin likewise, since falsehood comes of stealing. But what means, thou shalt perform unto the Lord thine oaths? It is this, thou shalt be true in swearing. But I say unto you, swear not at all. Next, to lead them farther away from swearing by God, he saith, Neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is the footstool of his feet, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. Still speaking out of the prophetical writings and signifying himself not to be opposed to the ancients. This was because they had a custom of swearing by these objects, and he intimates this custom near the end of his gospel. But mark, I pray thee, on what ground he magnifies the elements, not from their own nature, but from God's relation to them, such as it had been in condescension declared. For because the tyranny of idolatry was great, that the elements might not be thought worthy of honour for their own sake, he hath assigned this cause, which we have mentioned, which again would pass on to the glory of God. For he neither said, because heaven is beautiful and great, nor because earth is profitable, but because the one is God's throne, the other his footstool, on every side urging them on towards their Lord. Neither by the head, saith he, because thou canst not make one hair white or black. Here again, not as wondering at man, hath he withdrawn him from swearing by his head, for so man himself would be worshipped, but as referring the glory to God, and signifying that thou art not master even of thyself, and of course therefore not of the oaths made by thy head. For if no one would give up his own child to another, much more will not God give up his own work to thee. For though it be thy head, yet it is the property of another, and so far from being master thereof, thou shalt not be able to do with it, no, not the least thing of all. For he said not, thou canst not make one hair grow, but not so much as change its quality. But what, it may be said, if any one should require an oath, and apply constraint? Let the fear of God be more powerful than the constraint. Since, if thou art to bring forward such excuses, thou wilt keep none of the things which are enjoined. Yea, for first, with respect to thy wife, thou wilt say, what if she be contentious and extravagant? And then as to the right eye, what if I love it, and am quite on fire? And of the unchaste look, what then if I cannot help seeing? And of our anger against a brother, what if I be hasty and not able to govern my tongue? And in general, all his sayings thou mayest on this wise trample under foot. Yet surely, with regard to human laws, thou darest not in any case use this allegation, nor say, what then if this or that be the case? But, willingly or unwillingly, thou receivest what is written. And besides, thou wilt never have compulsion to undergo it all. For he that hath hearkened unto those former blessings, and hath framed himself to be such as Christ enjoined, will have no such constraint to endure from any, being held in reverence and veneration by all. But let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay. For that which exceedeth these cometh of the evil one. What is it then that exceeds yea and nay? It is the oath, not the perjury. For this latter is quite acknowledged, and no man needs to learn that it is of the evil one, and it is not an excess, but an opposite. Whereas an excess means something more, and added over and above, which kind of thing swearing is. What then, saith one, was it of the evil one? And if it was of the evil one, how was it a law? Well, this same thing thou wilt say concerning the wife also. How is that now accounted adultery, which was before permitted? What now may one reply to this? That the precepts then uttered had reference to the weakness of them who were receiving the laws. Since also to be worshipped with the vapour of sacrifice is very unworthy of God, just as to lisp is unworthy of a philosopher. That kind of thing accordingly was now laid down to be adultery, and swearing to be of the evil one, now that the principles of virtue have advanced. But if these things had been, from the first, laws of the devil, they would not have attained to so great goodness. Yea, for had those not been forerunners in the first place, these which we now have would not have been so easily received. Do not thou then require their excellency now, when their use is past, but then, when the time was calling for them. Or rather, if thou wilt, even now, yea, for now also is their virtue shown, and most of all for the very cause, by reason of which we find fault with them. For their appearing such now is the greatest commendation of them. For had they not brought us up well, and made us meet for the reception of the greater precepts, they would not have appeared such. Therefore, as the breast, when it hath fulfilled all its part, and is dismissing the child to the more manly diet, after that appears useless, and the parents who before thought it necessary for the babe, now abuse it with 10,000 mockeries, and many, even not content with words of abuse, anointed also with bitter drugs, that when their words have not power to remove the child's unseasonable propensity towards it, the real things may quench their longing. So also Christ saith, that they are of the evil one, not to indicate that the old law is of the devil, but in order that with most exceeding earnestness he might lead them away from their ancient poverty. And to them he saith these things. But with regard to the Jews, who were insensible, and persevered in the same ways, he hath anointed their city all round with the terror of captivity, as with some bitter drug, and made it inaccessible. But since not even this had power to restrain them, but they desired to see it again, running to it, just as a child to the breast, he hid it from them altogether, both pulling it down and leading away the more part of them far from it, as it is with our cattle. Many, by shutting out the calves, in time induce them to forego their old familiar use of the milk. But if the old law had belonged to the devil, it would not have led people away from idolatry, but rather would have drawn them on and cast them into it. For this did the devil desire. But now we see the opposite effect produced by the old law. And indeed this very thing, the oath, was ordained of old for this cause, that they might not swear by the idols. For ye shall swear, saith he, by the true God. They were then no small advantages which the law affected, but rather very great. For that they came unto the strong meat was the work of its care. What then, it may be said, is not swearing of the evil one? Yes, indeed it is altogether of the evil one. That is, now, after so high a rule of self-restraint, but then not so. But how, one may say, should the same thing become at one time good, at another time not good? Nay, I say the very contrary. How could it help becoming good and not good, while all things are crying aloud that they are so? The arts, the fruits of the earth, and all things else. See it, for example, taking place first in our own kind. Thus, to be carried in the earliest age of life is good, but afterwards pernicious. To eat food that hath been softened in the mouth, in the first scene of our life, is good, but afterwards it is full of disgust. To be fed upon milk and to fly to the breast, is at first profitable and healthful, but tends afterwards to decay and harm. Seest thou how the same actions, by reason of the times, appear good, and again not so? Yea, and to wear the robe of a child is well as long as you are a boy, but contrariwise, when you are become a man, it is disgraceful. Wouldest thou learn of the contrary case too? How to the child again the things of the man are unsuited. Give the boy a man's robe, and great will be the laughter, and greater the danger, he being often upset and walking after that fashion. Allow him to handle public affairs, and to traffic, and sow, and reap, and great again will be the laughter. And why do I mention these things? When killing, which among all is acknowledged to be an invention of the evil one, killing, I say, having found its proper occasion, caused Phineas, who committed it, to be honored with the priesthood. For that killing is a work of him whom I just now mentioned. Hear what Christ saith. Ye will do the works of your father. He was a manslayer from the beginning. But Phineas became a manslayer, and it was counted unto him, so he speaks, for righteousness. And Abraham again, on becoming not a manslayer only, but, which was far worse, the slayer of his child, won more and more approbation. And Peter too wrought a twofold slaughter. Nevertheless, what he did was of the Spirit. Let us not then examine simply the acts, but the season too, and the causes, and the mind, and the difference of persons, and whatsoever else may accompany them. These let us search out with all exactness, for there is no arriving at the truth otherwise. And let us be diligent, if we would attain into the kingdom, to show forth something more than the old commandments, since we cannot otherwise lay hold of the things of heaven. For if we arrive but at the same measure, that of the ancients, we shall stand without that threshold. For except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven. Yet, although so heavy a threat is set down, there are some who so far from overpassing this righteousness, even come short of it. So far from shunning oaths, they even swear falsely. So far from avoiding an unchaste gaze, they even fall into the very act of wickedness. And all the rest of the things which are forbidden, they dare to do, as though past feeling, waiting for one thing only, the day of punishment, and the time when they are to pay the most extreme penalty for their misdoings. And this is the portion of those only who have ended their lives in wickedness. For these have reason to despair, and thenceforth to expect nothing else but punishment. Whereas they who are yet here may have power both to renew the fight, and to conquer and be crowned with ease. Despond not therefore, O man, neither put away thy noble earnestness. For in truth the things are not grievous which are enjoined. What trouble is it, I pray thee, to shun an oath? What, does it cost any money? Is it sweat and hardship? It is enough to have willed only, and the whole is done. But if you allege to me thine habit, for this very reason most of all do I say, that thy doing right is easy. For if thou bring thyself to another habit, thou hast effected all. Consider, for example, how among the Greeks, in many instances, persons lisping have entirely cured by much practice their halting tongue, while others, who were used to shrug up their shoulders in an unseemly way, and to be continually moving them, by putting a sword over them, have broken themselves of it. For since you are not persuaded out of the Scriptures, I am compelled to shame you by them that are without. This God also did unto the Jews, when he said, Go ye forth unto the isles of Chittim, and send unto Kedar, and know if nations will change their gods, which yet are no gods. And to the brutes likewise he sends us oftentimes, saying on this wise, Go to the ant, thou sluggard, and emulate her ways, and go forth to the bee. This therefore I also now say unto you, Consider the philosophers of the Greeks, and then you will know of how great punishment we are worthy, who disobey the laws of God, and that they for seemliness before men have taken exceeding pains, and you bestow not the same diligence, no, not for the things of heaven. But if thou shouldst reply, Habit has a wonderful power to beguile even those who are very much in earnest. This I likewise acknowledge. However, there is another thing which I say with it, that as it is powerful to beguile, so also it is easy to be corrected. For if thou wilt set over thyself at home many to watch thee, such as thy servant, thy wife, thy friend, thou wilt easily break off from the bad habits, being hard pressed and closely restrained by all. If thou succeed in doing this for 10 days only, thou wilt after that no longer need any further time, but all will be secured to thee, rooted anew in the firmness of the most excellent habit. When therefore thou art beginning to correct this, though thou shouldest transgress thy law a first, a second, a third, a 20th time, do not despair, but rise up again, and resume the same diligence, and thou wilt surely prevail. For perjury surely is no trifling mischief. If to swear is of the evil one, how great the penalty which false swearing will bring. Did ye give praise to what hath been said? Nay, I want not applause, nor tumults, nor noise. One thing only do I wish, that quietly and intelligently listening, you should do what is said. This is the applause, this the panegyric for me. But if thou praisest what I say, but doest not what thou applaudest, greater is the punishment, more aggravated the accusation, and to us it is shame and ridicule. For the things here present are no dramatic spectacle, neither do ye now sit gazing on actors, that ye may merely applaud. This place is a spiritual school. Wherefore also there is but one thing aimed at, duly to perform the things that have been spoken, and to show forth our obedience by our works. For then only shall we have obtained all, since as things are, to say the truth, we have fairly given up in despair. For I have not ceased giving these admonitions either to those whom I meet in private, or in discourse with you all in common. Yet I see no advantage at all gained, but you are still clinging to the former rude beginnings, which thing is enough to fill the teacher with weariness. See, for example, Paul himself hardly bearing it, because his scholars were delaying a long time in their earlier lessons. For when for the time, saith he, you ought to be teachers, ye have need to be taught again, which be the first principles of the oracles of God. Wherefore we too mourn and lament, and if I see you persisting, I will forbid you for the future to set foot on this sacred threshold, and partake of the immortal mysteries, as we do fornicators and adulterers, and persons charged with murder. Yea, for it is better to offer our accustomed prayers with 2 or 3 who keep the laws of God, than to sweep together a multitude of transgressors and corrupters of others. Let me have no rich man, no potentate puffing at me here, and drawing up his eyebrows. All these things are to me a fable, a shade, a dream. For no one of those who are now rich will stand up for me there, when I am called to account and accused, as not having thoroughly vindicated the laws of God with all due earnestness. For this ruined even that admirable old man, though in his own life giving no handle for blame, yet for all that, because he overlooked the treading underfoot of God's laws, he was chastised with his children, and paid that grievous penalty. And if, where the absolute authority of nature was so great, he who failed to treat his own children with due firmness endured so grievous a punishment, what indulgence shall we have, freed as we are from that dominion, and yet ruining all by flattery? In order therefore that ye may not destroy both us and your own selves with us, be persuaded, I entreat you. Set very many to watch over you, and call you to account, and so free yourselves from the habit of oaths, that going on orderly from thence, ye may both with all facility succeed in attaining unto all other virtue, and may enjoy the good things to come, which God grant that we may all win, by the grace and love towards man of our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom be glory and might now and always, even for ever and ever. Amen. Homily 18, Matthew 5:38 through 48. Ye have heard that it hath been said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. But I say unto you, that ye resist not the evil. But whosoever shall smite thee on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. Seest thou that it was not of an eye that he was speaking before, when he made the law to pluck out the offending eye, but of him who by his friendship is harming us, and casting us into the gulf of destruction? For he who in this place uses so great strength of expression, and who, not even when another is plucking out your eye, permits you to strike out his, how should he have made it a law to strike out one's own? But if anyone accuses the ancient law, because it commands such retaliation, he seems to me very unskilful in the wisdom that becomes a legislator, and ignorant of the virtue of opportunities and the gain of condescension. For if he considered who were the hearers of these sayings, and how they were disposed, and when they received this code of laws, he will thoroughly admit the wisdom of the lawgiver, and will see that it is one and the same, who made both those laws and these, and who wrote each of them exceeding profitably, and in its due season. Yes, for if at the beginning he had introduced these high and most weighty commandments, men would not have received either these or the others, but now, ordaining them severally in their due time, he hath by the two corrected the whole world. And besides, he commanded this, not that we might strike out one another's eyes, but that we might keep our hands to ourselves. For the threat of suffering hath effectually restrained our inclination to be doing. And thus, in fact, he is silently dropping seed of much self-restraint, at least in that he commands to retaliate with just the same acts. Yet surely he that began such transgression were worthy of a greater punishment, and this the abstract nature of justice demands. But forasmuch as he was minded to mingle mercy also with justice, he condemns him whose offences were very great to a punishment less than his desert, teaching us even while we suffer to show forth great consideration. Having therefore mentioned the ancient law and recognized it all, he signifies again, that it is not our brother who hath done these deeds, but the evil one. For this cause he hath also subjoined, But I say unto you, that ye resist not the evil one. He did not say, Resist not your brother, but the evil one, signifying that on his motion men dare so to act, and in this way relaxing and secretly removing most of our anger against the aggressor, by transferring the blame to another. What then, it is said, ought we not to resist the evil one? Indeed we ought, but not in this way, but as he hath commanded, by giving oneself up to suffer wrongfully, for thus shalt thou prevail over him. For one fire is not quenched by another, but fire by water. And to show thee that even under the old law he that suffered rather prevails, that he it is who wins the crown, examine just what is done, and thou wilt see that his advantage is great. For as he that hath begun with unjust acts will have himself destroyed the eyes of both, his neighbours and his own, wherefore also he is justly hated of all, and 10,000 accusations are aimed at him. So he that hath been injured, even after his equal retaliation, will have done nothing horrible. Wherefore also he hath many to sympathize with him, as being clear from that offence even after he hath retaliated. And though the calamity be equal to both parties, yet the sentence passed on it is not equal, either with God or with men. It should seem then that neither is the calamity equal in the end. Now, whereas at the beginning he said, He that is angry with his brother without a cause, and he that calleth him fool shall be in danger of hell fire, here he requires yet more entire self-restraint, commanding him that suffers ill not merely to be quiet, but even to be more exceedingly earnest in his turn, by offering the other cheek. And this he saith, not as legislating about such a blow as this only, but as teaching also what forbearance we should practice in all our other trials. For just as when he saith, Whoso calleth his brother fool is in danger of hell, he speaks not of this word only, but also of all reviling. Even so here also he is making a law, not so much for our bearing it manfully when smitten, as that we should be undisturbed whatever we suffer. Because of this, he both there singled out the extremest insult, and here hath set down that which seems to be of all blows most opprobrious, the blow on the cheek, so full of all insolence. And he commands this as having regard both of him that strikes and of him that is stricken, since both he that is insulted will not think that he suffers any harm, being thus framed to self-restraint, nay, he will not even have any sense of the insult, as striving rather for a prize than as receiving a blow. And he that is offering the affront will be made ashamed, and not add a second blow, though he be fiercer than any wild beast, yea, rather will condemn himself heartily for the former. For nothing so restrains the wrongdoers, as when the injured bear what is done with gentleness. And it not only restrains them from rushing onward, but works upon them also to repent for what is gone before, and in wonder at such forbearance to draw back. And it makes them more our own, and causes them to be slaves, not merely friends, instead of haters and enemies, even as avenging oneself does just the contrary. For it both disgraces each of the two, and makes them worse, and their anger it heightens into a greater flame, yea, often no less than death itself is the end of it, going on from bad to worse. Wherefore he not only forbade thee to be angry when smitten, but even enjoined thee to satiate the other's desire, that so neither may the former blow appear to have befallen thee against thy will. For thus, lost as he may be to shame, thou wilt be able to smite him with a mortal blow, rather than if thou hadst smitten him with thine hand. Or, if his shamelessness be still greater, thou wilt make him gentle in proportion. And if any man will sue thee at the law, and take away thy coat, let him have thy cloak also. For not in the matter of blows only, but of our goods also, he would have such forbearance exhibited. Wherefore he again employs the same strong figure. That is, as in the other case he commands to overcome in suffering, so here again, by allowing ourselves to be deprived of more than the wrongdoer expected. However, he did not put it so merely, but with something to enhance it, not saying, Give thy cloak to him that asketh, but to him that would sue thee at the law, that is, if he drag thee into court and give thee trouble. And just as, after he had bidden not to call another fool, nor to be angry without cause, he went on and required more, in that he commanded to offer the right cheek also, even so here, having said, Agree with thine adversary, he again amplifies the precept. For now he orders us not only to give what the other would have, but even to show forth a greater liberality. What then, one may say, am I to go about naked? We should not be naked if we obeyed these sayings with exactness. Rather more abundantly than any should we be clothed. For first, no one would attack men of this disposition. And next, if there chance to be any one so savage and ungentle as to proceed even so far, yet many more would be found to clothe him who acted with such self-denial, not with garments only, but even with their own flesh, if it were possible. Further, even though one were of necessity to go about naked on account of this sort of self-denial, neither so were it any disgrace, since Adam too was naked in paradise, and was not ashamed. And Isaiah was naked, and barefoot, and more glorious than all the Jews. And Joseph also, when he stripped himself, did then more than ever shine forth. For to be thus naked is no evil, but to be so clad, as we now are, with costly garments, this is both disgraceful and ridiculous. For this cause, you see, those had praise of God, but these he blames, both by prophets and apostles. Let us not therefore suppose his injunctions impossible. Nay, for besides their expediency, they are very easy, if we are sober-minded, and the profit of them is so great as to be an exceeding help, not to ourselves only, but to those also who are using us despitefully. And in this chiefly stands their excellence, that while they induce us to suffer wrong, they by the same means teach them also that do the wrong to control themselves. For while he on his part thinks it a great thing to take what belongs to others, but thou signifiest to him, that to thee it is easy to give even what he doth not ask, while thou bringest in liberality for a counterpoise to his meanness, and a wise moderation to his covetousness. Consider what a lesson he will get, being taught not by sayings, but by actual deeds, to scorn vice, and to seek after virtue. For God will have us profitable, not to ourselves alone, but to all our neighbors as well. Now if thou givest, and abstainest from suing, thou hast sought thine own advantage only. But if thou give him some other thing, thou hast made him too better, and so sent him away. Of this nature is salt, which is what he would have them to be, seeing it both recruits itself and keeps all other bodies with which it may associate. Of this nature is light, for it shows objects both to a man's self and to all others. Forasmuch then as he hath set thee in the rank of these things, help thou likewise him who is sitting in darkness, and teach him that neither before did he take anything by force. Persuade him that he hath done no despite. Yea, for thus thou thyself also will be had in more respect and reverence, if thou signify that thou gavest freely, and wert not robbed. Make therefore his sin, through thy moderation, an instance of thine own bounty. And if thou think this a great thing, wait, and thou wilt see clearly that neither yet hast thou attained to perfection. For not even here doth he stop with thee, who is laying down the laws of patient endurance, but he proceeds even further, thus saying, If any one shall compel thee to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Seest thou the height of self-denial? In this at least, that after giving thy coat and thy cloak, not even if thine enemy should wish to use thy naked body for hardships and labors, not even so, saith he, must thou forbid him. For he would have us possess all things in common, both our bodies and our goods, as with them that are in need, so with them that insult us. For the latter comes of manliness, the former of mercifulness. Because of this, he said, If any one shall compel thee to go 1 mile, go with him 2, again leading thee higher up, and commanding thee to show forth the same kind of ambition. For if the things of which he spake at the beginning, being far less than these, have so great blessings pronounced on them, consider what sort of portion awaits them who duly perform these, and what they become even before their rewards, in a human impassible body, winning entire freedom from passion. Since when neither insult, nor blows, nor the spoiling of their property galls them, while they give way to no such thing, but rather add in large measure to their endurance, reflect what kind of training their soul is undergoing. On this account then, as in regard of blows, as in regard of our goods, so in this case also he hath bidden us act. For why, saith he, do I mention insult and property? Though he should want to make use of thy very own limbs for toil and weary work, and this unjustly, do thou again conquer and overpass his unjust desire. For to compel is this, to drag unjustly and without any reason, and by way of despite. Nevertheless, for this also be thou ready in thy station, so as to suffer more than the other would fain do to thee. Give to him that asketh thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. These last are less than what went before, but marvel not. For this he is ever wont to do, mingling the small with the great. And if these be little in comparison with those, let them hearken, who take the goods of others, who distribute their own among harlots, and kindle to themselves a double fire, both by the unrighteous income and by the pernicious outlay. But by borrowing here, he means not the compact with usury, but the use merely. And elsewhere he even amplifies it, saying that we should give to them from whom we do not expect to receive. Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor, and hate thine enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, and pray for them which despitefully use you. Bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, that ye may become like your Father which is in heaven. For he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain on the just and on the unjust. See how he hath set the highest pinnacle on our good deeds. For this is why he teaches not only to endure a blow, but to offer the right cheek also, not only to add the cloak to the coat, but to travel also 2 miles with him who compels thee to go 1, in order that thou mightest receive with all facility that which is much more than these. But what, one may say, is more than these? Not even to count as an enemy him who is doing these things, or rather even somewhat else more than this. For he said not, do not hate, but love. He said not, do not injure, but do good. And if anyone should examine accurately, he will see that even to these things somewhat is added, much greater than they are. For neither did he simply command to love, but to pray. Seest thou how many steps he hath ascended, and how he hath set us on the very summit of virtue? Nay, mark it, numbering from the beginning. A first step is, not to begin with injustice. A second, after he hath begun, to vindicate oneself by equal retaliation. A third, not to do unto him that is vexing us the same that one hath suffered, but to be quiet. A fourth, even to give oneself up to suffer wrongfully. A fifth, to give up yet more than the other who did the wrong wishes. A sixth, not to hate him who hath done so. A seventh, even to love him. An eighth, to do him good also. A ninth, to entreat God himself on his behalf. Seest thou what height of self-command? Wherefore glorious too, as we see, is the reward which it hath. That is, because the thing enjoined was great, and needed a fervent soul, and much earnestness, he appoints for it also such a reward, as for none of the former. For he makes not mention here of earth, as with respect to the meek, nor of comfort and mercy, as with regard to the mourners and the merciful, nor of the kingdom of heaven, but of that which was more thrilling than all, our becoming like God, in such wise as men might become so. For he saith, that ye may become like unto your Father which is in heaven. And observe, I pray thee, how neither in this place, nor in the preceding parts, doth he call him his own Father, but in that instance God and a great King, when he was discoursing about oaths, and here their Father. And this he doth, as reserving for the proper season what he had to say touching these points. Then, bringing the likeness yet closer, he saith, because he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and sendeth rain upon just and unjust. For he too, so far from hating, so he speaks, even pours benefits on those that insult him. Yet surely in no respect is the case parallel, not only because of the surpassing nature of his benefits, but also by reason of the excellence of his dignity. For thou indeed art despised by thy fellow slave, but he by his slave, who hath also received 10,000 benefits from him. And thou indeed givest words in praying for him, but he deeds very great and marvelous, kindling the sun, and giving the annual showers. Nevertheless, even so I grant thee to be mine equal, in such wise as it is possible for a man so to be. Hate not then the man that doeth thee wrong, who is procuring thee such good things, and bringing thee to so great honour. Curse not him that uses thee despitefully, for so hast thou undergone the labour, but art deprived of the fruit. Thou wilt bear the loss, but lose the reward, which is of the utmost folly, having borne the more grievous, not to bear what is less than it. But how, saith one, is it possible for this to take place? Having seen God become man, and descend so far, and suffer so much for thy sake, dost thou still inquire and doubt how it is possible to forgive thy fellow servants their injuriousness? Hearest thou not him on the cross, saying, Forgive them, for they know not what they do? Hearest thou not Paul, when he saith, He who is gone up on high, and is sitting on the right hand, intercedeth for us? Seest thou not that even after the cross, and after he had been received up, he sent the apostles unto the Jews that had slain him, to bring them his 10,000 blessings, and this, though they were to suffer 10,000 terrors at their hands? But hast thou been greatly wronged? Nay, what hast thou endured like thy Lord? Bound, beaten with whips, with rods, spit upon by servants, enduring death, and that death which is of all deaths the most shameful, after 10,000 favours shown. And even if thou hast been greatly wronged, for this very cause most of all, do thou do him good, that thou mayest both make thine own crown more glorious, and set thy brother free from the worst infirmity. For so too the physicians, when they are kicked and shamefully handled by the insane, then most of all pity them, and take measures for their perfect cure, knowing that the insult comes of the extremity of their disease. Now I bid thee too have the same mind touching them that are plotting against thee, and do thou so treat them that are injuring thee. For it is they above all that are diseased, it is they who are undergoing all the violence. Deliver him then from this grievous contumely, and grant him to let go his anger, and set him free from that grievous demon, wrath. Yea, for if we see persons possessed by devils, we weep for them. We do not seek to be ourselves also possessed. Now let us do this likewise with respect to them that are angry. For in truth the enraged are like the possessed, yea, rather are more wretched than they, being mad with consciousness of it. Wherefore also their frenzy is without excuse. Trample not then on the fallen, but rather pity him. For so, should we see any one troubled with bile, blinded and giddy, and straining to cast up this evil humour, we stretch forth a hand, and continue to support him through his struggles, and though we may stain our garments, we regard it not, but seek one thing only, how we may set him free from this grievous distress. This then let us do with respect to the angry also, and continue to bear them up when vomiting and struggling, nor let him go until he put from him all the bitterness. And then shall he feel toward thee the greatest thankfulness. When he is at rest, then he will know clearly from how great trouble thou hast released him. But why do I speak of the thanks from him? For God will straightway crown thee, and will requite thee with 10,000 honours, because thou hast freed thy brother from a grievous disease. And that brother too will honour thee as a master, ever reverencing thy forbearance. Seest thou not the women that are in travail, how they bite those that stand by, and they are not pained? Or rather they are pained, but bear it bravely, and sympathize with them who are in sorrow and are torn by those pangs. These do thou too emulate, and prove not softer than women. For after these women have brought forth, for these men are more feeble-minded than women, then they will know thee to be a man in comparison. What then can we deserve, who are commanded to emulate God, and are perhaps in a way not so much as equal to the publicans? For if to love them that love us be the part of publicans, sinners, and heathens, when we do not even this, and we do it not, so long as we envy our brethren who are in honor, what penalty shall we not incur, commanded as we are to surpass the scribes, and taking our place below the heathens? How then shall we behold the kingdom, I pray thee? How shall we set foot on that holy threshold, who are not surpassing even the publicans? For this he covertly signified when he said, Do not even the publicans the same? And this thing most especially we may admire in his teaching, that while in each instance he sets down with very great fullness the prizes of the conflicts, such as to see God, and to inherit the kingdom of heaven, and to become sons of God, and like God, and to obtain mercy, and to be comforted, and the great reward. If anywhere he must needs mention things grievous, he doth this in a subdued tone. Thus in the first place, the name of hell he hath set down once only in so many sentences, and in some other instances too, it is with reserve that he corrects the hearer, and as though he were managing his discourse rather in the way of shaming than threatening him, where he saith, Do not even the publicans the same? And if the salt have lost its savour, and he shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. And there are places where he puts down the sin itself by way of punishment, leaving to the hearer to infer the grievousness of the punishment, as when he saith, He hath committed adultery with her in his heart, and he that putteth away causeth her to commit adultery. And that which is more than these is of the evil one. For to them that have understanding, instead of the mention of the punishment, the very greatness of the sin is sufficient for correction. Wherefore also he here brings forth the heathens and the publicans, by the quality of the person putting the disciple to shame, which Paul too did, saying, Sorrow not, even as the rest which have no hope, and even as the Gentiles which know not God. And to signify that he requires nothing very overpowering, but a little more than was accustomed, he saith, Do not even the Gentiles the same? Yet nevertheless he stops not the discourse at this, but makes it end with his rewards, and those good hopes, saying, Be ye therefore perfect, as your heavenly Father. And he intersperses everywhere abundantly the name of the heavens, by the very place thoroughly elevating their minds. For as yet, I know not how, they were somewhat weak and dull. Let us then, bearing in mind all the things which have been said, show forth great love even towards our enemies, and let us cast away that ridiculous custom, to which many of the more thoughtless give way, waiting for those that meet them to address them first. Towards that which hath a great blessing, they have no zeal. But what is ridiculous, that they follow after. Wherefore now dost thou not address him first? Because he is waiting for this, is the reply. Nay, for this very reason, most of all thou shouldest have sprung forward to him, that thou mightest win the crown. No, saith he, since this was his object. And what can be worse than this folly? That is, because this, saith he, was his object, to become procurer of a reward for me. I will not put my hand to what he has thus suggested. Now if he first address thee, thou gainest nothing, even though thou accost him. But if thou be first to spring forward and to speak to him, thou hast made thyself prophet of his pride, and hast gathered in a manner abundant fruit from his obstinacy. What is it then but the utmost folly, when we are to reap so large fruit from bare words, to give up the gain, and condemning him to stumble at the very same thing? For if thou blamest him for this, that he first waits to be addressed by another, wherefore dost thou emulate that same thing which thou accusest? That which thou saidst was evil. Why art thou to imitate the same as good? Seest thou how that nothing is more senseless than a man who associates with wickedness? Wherefore I entreat, let us flee this evil and ridiculous practice. Yea, for 10,000 friendships hath this pestilence overthrown, many enmities hath it wrought. For this cause then let us anticipate them. Since we who are commanded to take blows, and be compelled to journey, and to be stripped by enemies, and to bear it, what kind of indulgence should we deserve, exhibiting so great contentiousness in a mere formal address? Why, saith one, we are despised and spit upon the moment we have given him up this? And in order that man may not despise thee, dost thou offend God? And in order that thy frenzied fellow servant may not despise thee, dost thou despise the Lord, who hath bestowed on thee benefits so great? Nay, if it be amiss that thine equal should despise thee, how much more that thou shouldest despise the God that made thee? And together with this, consider that other point also, that when he despises thee, he is at that very moment employed in procuring to thee a greater reward, since for God's sake thou submittest to it, because thou hast hearkened to his laws. And this, to what kind of honor is it not equal? To how many diadems? Be it my portion both to be insulted and despised for God's sake, rather than to be honored by all kings, for nothing is equal to this glory. This then let us pursue in such wise as himself commanded, and making no account of the things of men, but showing forth perfect self-restraint in all things. Let us so direct our own lives. For so even now, from this very time, we shall enjoy the good things of the heavens, and of the crowns that are there, walking as angels among men, going about in the earth like the angelic powers, and abiding apart from all lust, from all turmoil. And together with all these things we shall receive also the unutterable blessings, unto which may we all attain, by the grace and love towards man of our Lord Jesus Christ, to whom be glory and power and worship with the unoriginate Father and the Holy and good Spirit, now and always, even forever and ever. Amen.